Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2025 is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Dr. John Dentico. With me today is Manas Talukdar, a senior industry leader in enterprise AI and data infrastructure with nearly 2 decades of experience. He has made key contributions to the preeminent process data historian in the world. He has held leadership roles at multiple companies, building and leading organizations, developing large-scale AI and data products that are now used globally. He is a senior member of IEEE, an AI senior fellow and advisory board member. He mentors startups and industry professionals and often speaks at conferences. Manas has also been invited to judge prestigious industry awards and review technical publications. He has filed several patents in AI and data, and his contributions have been recognized through numerous honors, awards, and invitations to join prestigious AI organizations. It is certainly a hot topic, and I am truly pleased that Manas is here with me today. Hello, Manas. How are you?
Hi, John. I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here with you.
Great. I've got several questions. I always like to say, let's just jump right in. Manas, can you contrast for me the differences between running an engineering organization in a large company versus startups, especially as it relates to AI type projects?
Mhm. So that's a great question, John. So let me distill that into 2 parts. So first part is let's just answer it generically without AI, and then I'll talk about how AI in the picture changes the situation a little bit. So in bigger companies, there tends to be a bit more structure. There tends to be more synergy in terms of the company has figured out the product market fit. So there isn't as much that much of a rush to get things out there into the market, get things out there to customers and so forth. So engineering has more leeway, more time to get things out the door. So engineering can afford to function in a more traditional software development methodology where you do things in whether a sprint-based mechanism, or I know there are companies out there that even do 6-month waterfall cycles. But you can take your time to really follow the process, check off all the boxes, have a product spec, a detailed product spec, have a detailed engineering design document, do detailed reviews, start executing on it, do checkpointing, and so forth. So you can execute in a more of a I can do things at my own pace kind of way. In a startup, as it happens, you have to work in a highly dynamic fashion, very fast pace. In a lot of startups, depending on what stage you're at, they haven't quite figured out the product market fit sometimes. So it is extremely important to make sure that you are the first or one of the earliest to get your product into the market before your competitors do. So shipping things very quickly is paramount in a startup. That's one. Second thing is that having the ability to wear multiple hats. So it is quite conceivable that in a startup, in an engineering team, yes, there I like to make sure that there's definitive ownership of product areas and components. But it is also conceivable, it is in fact quite realistic that an engineer may have to work on multiple different things. While in a larger company, they may have more long-term ownership, they may have more compartmentalization of what they work on. In a startup, it is appreciated if engineers can work on multiple things, and that creates some challenges sometimes for leadership, where you have to make sure that engineers get that sense of, hey, I own something, instead of just jumping across the board into different things. While at the same time, you as an engineering leader, you may have to make sure that you are providing the right resources to the right projects that need to get shipped very quickly. So that's part one. Let's talk about how AI changes the picture a little bit. So I've been in the industry, as you said, for about a couple of decades, and I was there in the last decade when things were evolving and happening in the large scale distributed systems cloud computing domain. And things were happening rapidly, but I must say, the pace at which things are evolving, things are changing in the AI domain, both in the industry as well as what's happening in academia, is quite frankly unprecedented. And that creates its own set of challenges. Number one, in teams, in companies that's working on AI, you have to keep up with the latest trends, whether it's what's happening in industry, whether it's the research that's coming out of academia. So it creates its challenges in terms of having a longer term roadmap, because you might have a roadmap for a year, but by the time you get there, things have changed so much that you can't actually work on what you originally planned. So you have to make sure that it doesn't seem too chaotic to engineers, because engineers do appreciate a sense of stability. So it's about striking that balance between, hey, yes, we want to be highly dynamic, but at the same time, we also want to have a high level sense of where we are going, what we want to be working on.
It's very interesting. I see it. I see it in the sense that startup companies or medium and small companies and large companies are dealing with this hyper change, if you will, in the AI landscape every day. Things change every day it seems in AI. So it's a very interesting, both dealing with these issues. And of course, the question is, who is more adaptable to change?
Right.
It would seem smaller companies can adapt quicker to change because they're not, shall we say, ruled by a larger bureaucracy, if you will. I don't know. Any reflection on that?
Yeah, obviously, in smaller companies, there's no way around it. You have to be nimble. You have to not have to deal with any bureaucracy and so forth. And generally, in larger companies, and it's not by intent also always that larger companies are more bureaucratic. Some of it, unfortunately, is an artifact of how things evolve. But in smaller companies, in startups, it's you have to survive, and in order to survive, you have to make sure that you get things done, rather than get sucked into some bureaucratic rat hole. So that's just the reality of things.
Uh, I wanted to ask you to work my own certificate in AI ethics.
Mhm.
Okay. Trying to work through that and finish the training as an online training program. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I've had a couple of conversations with colleagues of mine, is this. One of the interesting aspects that I'm seeing, and I'm not saying this is something that's prevalent throughout the industry of AI, in the AI industry, but one of the aspects I'm seeing in it arising in the AI realm is the attribution of human sensibilities to AI. That is, treating AI as though it were human. Do you think this is wise? Why or why not?
That is a most remarkable question, I must say. So first of all, AI is not. We are way far out from AI having the sentience of a human being. What we are calling artificial general intelligence. We're not even remotely close, despite all the hype and so forth. In my personal opinion, we're not even remotely close to artificial general intelligence. So what's currently happening is AI is acting more as an enabler. And there is also unfortunately, a lot of apprehension. Some of it is quite unwarranted, that AI is going to replace human beings and so forth. I don't think so at all. As I said, we are far away from artificial general intelligence. So people should think about AI more as an enabler and a facilitator, rather than as a replacement for human endeavor. And AI can act as a facilitator for different fields of human endeavor, whether it's in the scientific domain or whether it's in the arts and humanities and so forth. Now, you mentioned about attribution. I think there's multiple facets in there. For first and foremost, I feel like there is probably going to be an epidemic. It has already happened. There is already an epidemic of people using AI to generate all sorts of things, some for fun and some for malicious intent. And obviously, attribution is completely lacking in the malicious intent. Obviously, attribution will be lacking. There are some things happening in the industry in terms of AI detectors and so forth, which will actually act as guardrails, where if somebody is using AI to pass something off as their own, then at some point these guardrails will catch that. And we're
Sure.
already go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And so I'm saying we're already seeing some usage of these guardrails in universities and so forth, where professors and teaching assistants are using it to detect whether somebody is using AI to generate a report and so forth. Now, I must say, some of these AI detectors also have an inordinate amount of false positives. So there's that too. For example, just for my own curiosity, I wrote something of my own volition, no AI, and then I tested it with one of those AI detectors, and it said that, hey, this is generated by AI, which made no sense whatsoever. So I think we are now in a situation where things are in a bit of an upheaval, things are in a bit of a dynamic mode, but it is converging, it is moving towards a balance, in my opinion, where we will have these false positives go down, and we will hopefully get to a situation where people, human beings of their own volition, will act in a more ethical manner and actually attribute AI when they're using AI.
Okay. And keep it as an enabler or as an assistant, if you will,
Right.
to whatever their practices are, for example. I know of several months ago, I did a webinar for an engineering group. And prior to that, I was talking to one of the people that was arranging it. She told me a case of an engineer who apparently was in class working on a master's program, had already had his engineering license, and wrote a paper
Mhm.
using AI, used and let AI basically write the paper for him. Sent it in, and apparently the professor used a detector or found out that one of the pieces, it happened, as I recollect, in the paper, it would quote it a legal case or a law case, which in fact didn't exist.
Right.
And the consequences was the engineer lost his license. I guess he was a PE and lost his license, probably have to go back and try to work his way through that again. But I think there has to be very much of a lot wariness, if you will, about how it's being used and how it's free. I'll give you an example. I use the AI portion of Grammarly to
Mhm.
do editing. Sometimes I won't find exactly the phraseology, and I'll say, here, take a look at this and give me better phrasing.
Right.
I also use it in Descript, which is the program I use to do the final touch ups on podcasts. And it does a brilliant job on show notes. I have to say, it does a wonderful job on show notes. It just writes the show notes and it's just really taken off I check it all, I read it all, I make some changes here and there. The other thing I noticed that it will do when I'm writing, again, let me go back to the Grammarly section, is any sort of human kind of touch that I put in it, it will take it out. For example, I'll give you a simple example. I might life is like a box of chalk from Forrest Gump. Wow, it will just say no. You can't have that. An interesting experiment, if you will, or experience. It's very interesting to me. I wanted to ask you this because I've seen some things. Is it fair, Manas, to ask this question? If you look at AI, and let's talk about the form of Chat GPT, would we that AI is it fair to say, let me say it this way, that AI is not objective, that certain biases are built into AI having to do with the individuals, perhaps, who are in fact doing the algorithm development?
I completely agree with that. I would add that algorithm development plays some part, but there are other aspects as well, and I'm happy to elaborate on that. So one other aspect, the primary aspect, in my opinion, is what kind of data that AI model has been trained on. Because at the end of the day, the training data will determine the accuracy, the bias of what the AI model outputs, which is why I think it is extremely important to make sure that training data for AI models are representative of a wide swath of different opinions and so forth. because otherwise, if you train the model based on just one set of or one representation of thought, then obviously that's what the model is going to output. It's pretty logical that way. Now, that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is how these developers of these AI models, developers of these LLMs, how they build some of these guardrails. I think that's also something that needs to be talked about. So, for example, without going into specifics, you can think about, say, when you ask a question, when you ask, which is called a prompt to an LLM, it's possible the LLM developer might build a guardrail actually intercepting your prompt. Okay. And then rephrasing your prompt in a way which the LLM developer might think, hey, this is actually the right way to ask the question, whatever right means. That's one aspect of it. The other side of it is when the LLM actually provides its output, then the LLM developer might intercept that output and then actually edit the output in a way which the LLM developer believes this is actually the right thing to say instead of what the LLM originally outputted. And I think, in my opinion, the data aspect of it will average out over time. The training data aspect of it, and LLM developers, the AI labs, they're acutely aware of this, and they are actually trying very hard to get a wide representation of data. But the building of the guardrail is very intrinsically tied to personal thoughts and beliefs of the organizations or the engineers who are actually building these things. In most cases, in most organizations have this AI trust and safety group in different flavors and different names. So the people who run these groups, they typically have a lot of say in how these guardrails function. So, and that's a lot of power, because at the end of the day, these LLMs are going to get embedded in variety of different use cases all over the world. So if somebody is building a guardrail based on, hey, this is how I think it should be, I think that needs to be more widely discussed.
Candidate, what answer that is. I appreciate that so very much. And you raised an issue, and I had not thought about this, and that is, and it's true in anything, and that is, how do you phrase or how do you ask the question? In a sense that you can ask it one way and it'll give you an answer more toned towards the output it thinks you want. And you could also rephrase the question the way and almost, if you will, switch the answer around, almost looking at the converse of it in a manner of speaking. So yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's a very wise comment, and I appreciate that very much. And those of you who don't know what LLM means, it's large language model. So I just wanted to make that
Sure.
clear. The other thing too is I really enjoy this conversation here about guardrail, finding the guardrail. Could you take me down that road a little bit more? Perspective you have on guardrails.
Right. So my perspective is, first and foremost, the holy grail is that the training data needs to be diverse and representative of human society. Basically, it cannot be just one school of thought or few schools of thought. And like I said, AI labs are actually aware of this, and they are working to address the situation because of lack of training data in certain aspects and so forth. And of course, there are machine learning techniques which can help to make up where there is actually a genuine lack of training data in certain aspects. So I'm not too particularly concerned about the training data aspect, because I think this will organically resolve where it's not resolved. Now, talking about the guardrails, there's multiple aspects here. One is, let's talk about personally identifiable information. So if training data contains personally identifiable information, then that needs to be anonymized or masked for sure. And again, there's algorithms which enable that. It's just that, and I have absolutely no doubt about it. I can say for sure that AI labs are actually taking into account anonymization of personally identifiable information for the most part. That's one. Second is AI trust and safety, where we do have to, yes, guardrails have to be there, but there has to be a balance in there. So guardrails can be that, as I said, intercepting a prompt or intercepting the LLM output, because we do have to be aware of the fact that there will be human actors who would want to, or who would use AI for malicious intent. And the technologists and LLM developers and AI labs actually have to build these guardrails against these malicious actors. But at the same time, as I said, there's a balance in there. We cannot use these guardrails to adhere to somebody's own personal opinions or somebody's own personal political beliefs, ideological beliefs, and so forth. So that's the high level view I take. Now, from a technical perspective, as I said, interception is one way to go about it. There are other machine learning techniques and so forth also to build guardrails. So there's multiple ways to go about it.
Interesting. I appreciate that. Very candid and very truthful. So I truly appreciate that. People have to be wary. They have to really be, if you will, up on their toes. Question they're asking, saying in the prompt, and what they're getting, in a sense, almost looking behind the data in a manner of speaking, certainly at this and perhaps into the future as well. So I appreciate that very much. I ask this question, and that is about how you as an engineer, how is AI affecting engineering organizations? Okay. Are there processes or procedures in a sense that will go by the wayside? And might those processes be? Don't
Right.
mind me asking that.
The biggest impact AI is having in engineering is actually, as I said, the enabling part of it, where engineers and I myself, we use this what we call co-pilots a lot. And the co-pilot is basically, it helps engineers to write code much faster, much easier. You get context about the code base. It helps engineers write unit tests a lot faster. So I strongly encourage engineers in my organizations to use these co-pilots as much as they can. In fact, there's now software development IDEs, integrated development environments, which are going beyond just a co-pilot as an extension, and they are actually taking an AI first approach. And there's I forget the exact name of it. There's an idea that came out recently, and that's actually making a lot of waves, and it works really well, which is taking an AI first approach. So that is hugely enabling engineering and engineers to be more productive than in the past. So that's one. Second, in terms of processes, I think I can give an example. Recently, I was in conversation with a startup. I do mentor startups. I provide them guidance once in a while. So one of those startups, they're developing a product where that product goes and looks at all the projects that is currently ongoing in engineering, who's working on what the statuses are, and what for, how many tickets under these projects has been closed, how many are open. And based on that, it provides a very holistic kind of Q&A form of interface for executives to get a bird's eye view of how initiatives are ongoing. And it's really very interesting. They built a really cool product where you can actually, an executive can go and ask a question. Hey, can you give me the status for, say, initiative A? How close are we to shipping it so we can get some revenue? And the AI will actually holistically look at all of this information and then provide a very actionable, insightful answer. And now, if you think about it, previously getting that answer would involve actually a quite drawn out process where you have to form multiple meetings, deal with multiple people, ask for 50 different reports, and then try to make sense of all of these pieces of information. So, what AI is doing, AI is actually parsing a lot of pieces of data and then providing actionable insights based on that data.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask you, as with everything, new jobs, new job titles are created. The other day, I saw an advertisement for, or a reference to, more than, I don't know if it was an advertisement, but a reference to what an AI prompt engineer. Okay. And I was very curious about that. And the pay, I have to say, the pay grade was pretty high. It was pretty significant. So I have to ask this for someone like me, or the average citizen, if you will, if I wanted to get prompt training, is there a place that I could go? Is there a place that people can go that you know of that provides basic training in how to use something like ChatGPT?
Yeah, there are free resources out there. There are multiple people, technical people on YouTube who are actually putting out these videos on how to craft a right prompt. Typically, my approach is, if there's a good book out there, to actually read the book and try to get as much information as possible instead of trying to get that from multiple different spread out disparate sources. So my recommendation is to actually go read a book, and there's multiple books out there. I believe, if I remember correctly, there's a prestigious publication called Manning Publications. And by the way, full disclosure, I'm a reviewer for their publications. So Manning Publications actually has a book, 1 or 2 books on prompt engineering. So I strongly recommend people to, whether it's Manning, whether it's some other publication, go read a book on prompt engineering, because reading the book will actually give you that one single source where you can get 80% of the information that otherwise you'd have to look at. Let's go look at this blog post, let's go look at this YouTube video, which is going to take a lot of time. So read the book, whether if you want to learn more about prompt engineering, or any of your listeners, I strongly recommend to first take the book approach and then go and see what's out there. Go and see what YouTube videos out there, what resources are out there. One other recommendation I would make is actually read the documentation for some of these large language models. For example, OpenAI actually has documentation on how to do prompt engineering. Similarly, Gemini for Google has documentation. And what happens is, and this may not be directly accessible or easily accessible to non-technical people, but a lot of the insider insights into how to do prompt engineering actually comes from the API documentation for these LLMs. If it's not out there in the user-facing documentation, I would recommend go look at the API documentation. And if you search for, say, for example, Gemini API prompt, and then that might actually take you to where you need to be.
Great. I appreciate that very much. Well, we're getting close to the end. I'd like to ask you my what I refer to as my world famous last question. It has to do with the magic wand. So if you could wave your magic wand, Manas, at an issue or problem in the world in which you work, what would that problem be, and why did you choose that?
I think what I would do is I would make technology more appealing to students who are in, say, in middle school, because what happens is most people, I would say more than half of people, half of students, half of kids, make a decision about what career they would go into probably by the end of middle school. So, and then what happens is there's a lot of apprehension in people, especially now. There's two parts to it. In a lot of countries, people choose to go to technology because, for say, for financial incentives. Say, if I go into a tech career, I can make more money, right? But in some countries, probably where there is no need for such financial incentive, people inherently do not choose to go into technology because they feel like, hey, it's too tough for me or something. So I don't really like that idea that, hey, this is too tough for me. I think we need to make it seem to students, make it seem to kids in middle school that, hey, technology is not tough. Technology can actually make life easier. So we need to make technology more ingrained into curriculum in middle schools. And actually now, with the advent of AI becoming more accessible to people all over the world, I think this is the best time to do it. Where, in my opinion, and you touched upon a good point about attribution when we were talking about attribution. I think instead of schools and universities being, to some extent, unnecessarily apprehensive about AI and so forth, I think they should think about how can we actually make it more fun, make it more enablement for students to use AI. For example, in school curriculum, they can actually say that, hey, I want you to write this report, but I want you to actually use AI. And then as part of your report, put a section on how you used AI to write this report. Okay. So then people will be actually thinking, students will be thinking, okay, so if I do a copy paste, I'm going to get caught right away.
Right.
So I actually have to put some thought into how do I use AI to write this report. But at the same time, I absolutely must not do a copy paste. So things like those, I think if we do things like those in school curriculum, it'll actually encourage students to move more into technology than what's happening right now.
Yeah, I have a colleague named Jeff DeCagna, and Jeff's very big into associations around the country, speaks a lot, and the area that he is really focused on right now is AI. And his perspective, I think, is a good one in that he says there should be, in a sense, full disclosure, just like you said.
Right.
If I use AI to do something for me, I should say, and oh, by the way, this was developed using ChatGPT or whatever LLM we're going to use to do that, so people understand, hey, listen, I can trust this guy. Trust is not going to go away, as you well know. It's going to be here. And it's I call it the transcendent value, it cuts across everything. And when you sell people, listen, I developed this using an AI model or developed this using ChatGPT, people, I think, will respect that. And they'll say, hey, that looks like a really good piece of advice, not only, but for example, now you're seeing a lot of AI being introduced in terms of marketing efforts
Right.
and how you can use AI to do everything and take a video like this we're making right now, cut it up into pieces and send it to different social media outlets and things like that, and letting AI pick and choose what it wants to and use that. But I think, again, along with that, there has to be some level of disclosure. So I appreciate that very much. I think it's a very interesting world we're entering with AI. And let's hope that good things come from it. And as you say, it's trained well. It's trained across a horizon of things
Right.
that represents lots of different perspectives and opinions, provides the information you may need, but gives you pause to think about it. And maybe I should see this problem from a number of sides instead of just one side. Well, let's see where that takes us. Manas, thank you so very much for being here today with me on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I wish you great success, all success in the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, John, for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.